Leo heard them all but said nothing. He stared down at the splintered wood in his hands, feeling a strange weight in his chest. It wasn't just the shame of failure. It was confusion. The oak had looked so strong, so solid, yet it had broken so easily. How could something that yielded be stronger than something that stood its ground? Master Elian brushed the dirt from his hands and spoke once more, his voice calm and clear. You see, my students, the world does not favor only one kind of strength. The mountain stands tall, but it cannot move. The river flows and carves valleys through stone. Both endure, but in different ways. The wise learn to be both, steady like the oak in purpose, and like the bamboo in spirit. The children nodded, though only a few truly understood. Leo stood apart, staring at the unbroken bamboo, its green stalk gleaming in the sunlight. The breeze caught its leaves, and it swayed lightly, whispering as if speaking directly to him. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the students left the garden chattering about the day's lesson. Only Leo lingered. He crouched beside the bamboo, gently touching its stem. It was cool beneath his fingertips, smooth and alive. He pushed it down once more. It bent and rose back again. For the first time, Leo felt something stir within him. Not anger, not frustration, but curiosity. Why does it bend without breaking? Why does it move and yet remain strong? Behind him, Master Elian's voice broke the silence. The bamboo is like the wise man, Leo. It listens to the wind. It learns from it. Leo turned. But it gives in, he said quietly. It doesn't fight. Elian smiled. No, it doesn't fight the wind. It dances with it. And so it lives to see another season. The boy looked down again, tracing the curve of the bamboo stem. He didn't know what to say. For once he had no argument ready, no sharp words to hide behind. He simply nodded, though part of him still resisted the idea. The teacher placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to understand today. Just remember what you've seen. The mind learns long after the eyes have looked away. Leo glanced up at him, and for the briefest moment, the fire in his eyes softened. Yes, master, he said quietly. As Master Elian walked away, the last light of sunset poured through the garden, painting the bamboo in gold. Leo stayed there a while longer, listening to the wind rustling through its leaves, a sound like quiet laughter, or perhaps quiet truth. Chapter 3. Storms Within, expanded version. Approximately 1,500 words. That night, Leo lay in his small wooden bed, the moonlight spilling through the window and painting silver stripes across the floor. He stared at the ceiling, tracing the knots in the wood, as if they might offer answers. The image of the broken oak from the school garden refused to leave him. He hated being wrong. He hated the way Master Elian's calm, gentle words had unsettled him, shaking the certainty he had always clung to. Pride was his shield, stubbornness his armor. Yet now they felt brittle, like thin glass in a storm. He turned onto his side, hugging a pillow, but sleep would not come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the oak snapping in half, the smooth, unbroken bamboo bending with effortless grace. The lesson gnawed at him, persistent and insistent. By morning, his restlessness spilled into action. He joined his father in repairing a section of fence along the edge of their property. The wood was old and warped, the nails difficult to hammer straight. Leo, in his usual manner, insisted on doing everything his way. The nails should go this way, he said, holding the hammer with authority, or it won't hold. His father, a quiet man with calloused hands and patient eyes, simply sighed. He knew the boy's stubbornness well. He had walked the same path in his own youth. Try it your way, he said softly. If it works, it works. If not, he left the sentence hanging, letting experience teach the lesson. Leo hammered with force, confident in the righteousness of his method. Hours passed. Sweat ran down his forehead. Muscles ached, and yet the section of fence looked solid, at least to him. But the wind, rising unexpectedly in the afternoon, swept through the valley. One sharp gust toppled the section of fence he had built. The boards splintered, and the nails bent in protest. Leo froze, staring at the ruined work. He opened his mouth to blame the wind, the wood, even his father. But the man said nothing. He only stood a few feet away, his hands resting on his hips, watching silently. And in that silence, Leo felt a sting deeper than anger or frustration. It was the quiet truth of his own limitations, a lesson unspoken but impossible to ignore. In the days that followed, Leo began noticing how often his stubbornness caused trouble. When he played with his friends, he always demanded to lead, always insisted that his ideas were the best. If anyone disagreed, he argued and pushed until they gave in. Slowly, one by one, his friends began to avoid him. Even Mira, his closest friend, who had once admired his confidence and cleverness, started walking home without him after lessons. At first, Leo thought she was just busy, or perhaps a little tired. But the emptiness of her absence began to press on him, heavier than he expected. One afternoon, he found her by the river, skipping stones across the smooth, silver surface of the water. She tossed one pebble, then another, watching them leap lightly before plunging into the depths. "Why don't you wait for me anymore?" he asked, his voice quieter than he intended. She didn't look up at first. When she finally did, her eyes were calm but sad. "Because you never listen, Leo. You only talk. It's tiring." The words hit him harder than any scolding he had ever received. They were not shouted, not angry, not cruel, but precise, simple, and true. Leo wanted to argue, to insist that he did listen, that he did care. But for once, he couldn't find the words. He turned away, feeling the weight of silence press down on his chest. That evening, clouds gathered over Marestown. The sky darkened to a deep, bruised gray. The wind began to stir, whispering through the trees at first, then rising to a howl that rattled shutters and shook doors. Rain fell in sheets, slashing against the windows and turning the streets into tiny rivers. Leo stood at his bedroom window, mesmerized. The tall oaks in the valley groaned, their thick branches snapping one by one under the force of the storm. The noise of wood cracking and leaves thrashing filled the night, echoing in the boy's chest. Yet down by the river, a small grove of bamboo swayed. He watched as the bamboo bent almost to the ground, their stems forming graceful arcs beneath the wind's relentless pressure. Then, just as suddenly, they sprang upright again, untouched and perfectly straight. Leo felt something stir deep within him, a mixture of awe, wonder, and a gnawing sense of his own stubbornness. The lesson Master Elian had given him suddenly came alive in the world outside. The oak had resisted and broken. The bamboo had yielded and survived. He remembered his father's silent gaze, Mira's quiet disappointment, the snapped fence, and for the first time he began to understand. Stubbornness was not strength. It was brittle. It left one exposed, alone, and prone to failure. Flexibility, openness, and the ability to adapt. That was true strength. He closed his eyes, listening to the storm, and imagined himself as the bamboo, bending, yielding, and yet remaining unbroken. He felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. It was as if a heavy weight he hadn't realized he carried had been lifted slightly. The storm raged on outside, and Leo stayed at the window until his shoulders ached, and the rain slowed to a steady drizzle. When the first stars appeared, trembling through the retreating clouds, he finally turned away. He didn't speak to anyone that night, not to his parents, not to his friends, not even to himself. He simply sat quietly, thinking. And for the first time, he felt a small but undeniable shift in his heart. For days afterward, he tried. Not perfectly, not immediately, but he tried. He listened when his father offered advice on repairing tools. He paused when Mira suggested a game or a path to follow. Sometimes he still argued, sometimes he still insisted, but now he also waited, watched, and considered. One afternoon, as he and Mira sat by the river, she tossed a pebble and it skipped twice before sinking. Leo watched, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I'll wait," he said softly. "I'll listen." She glanced at him, surprised, and then smiled. Finally, she said. It wasn't a triumph, not yet, but it was a beginning. The rigid walls around his mind, the walls of oak, had started to crack. The bamboo within him had begun to grow. And in the quiet of that evening, watching the river reflect the last light of sunset, Leo understood something important. Storms would always come. Life would push, test, and batter him. But it was not the refusal to bend that made one strong. It was the courage to bend and rise again, wiser and unbroken. That night, Leo lay in bed and finally slept. The moonlight still danced on the floorboards, but now it felt like a promise rather than a challenge. The boy who had resisted every lesson, every gentle truth, was learning that strength was not stubbornness. Strength was endurance, patience, and the quiet wisdom to yield when needed. And somewhere deep within him, a new kind of pride began to take root, a pride that would not snap under pressure, a pride that could bend and grow. The bamboo within. The next morning, Leo arrived at the school garden earlier than usual. The air was crisp and fragrant with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. Dew clung to the leaves, sparkling like tiny jewels in the morning sun. Master Elian was already there, kneeling beside the herb bed, brushing soil gently around the roots of young plants. Leo paused at the gate, hesitant at first before stepping forward and bowing slightly, a gesture of respect he had rarely offered. Master, I broke the oak because I was too forceful. I thought strength meant never yielding, but now I see that sometimes bending doesn't mean weakness. Elian looked up from his work, his eyes warm and thoughtful. A fine observation, Leo. And what brought this change of heart? The storm, Leo said, his voice low. I saw the oaks fall under the wind. The bamboo survived because it bent. Elian nodded. Life is full of storms, some fierce, some subtle. Those who refuse to bend will always break first. But tell me, Leo, how will you learn to bend, even when it is difficult? Leo hesitated, unsure if he could answer the question honestly. After a long pause, he whispered, by listening, by not assuming I'm always right. The teacher's smile deepened. Good. Then your first lesson in bending begins today. Small challenges, big lessons. In the weeks that followed, Master Elian began giving Leo small tasks that tested his newfound understanding. One day, the students were assigned to plant a row of vegetables in the garden. Normally, Leo would have taken over, arranging everything according to his ideas. This time, he was instructed to work with Mira and another student, Thomas, who had their own plans. At first, Leo bristled. Thomas suggested planting carrots in one section and tomatoes in another, while Mira wanted a zigzag pattern for the herbs. Leo's instincts told him to override them, to impose order the way he thought best. But he remembered the bamboo, the way it yielded to the wind yet stood strong. So he paused. He listened to Mira, nodded at Thomas, and tried to imagine a solution that combined all their ideas. Why don't we plant the carrots in the zigzag pattern, Leo suggested carefully, and the tomatoes can follow Mira's row, but staggered so they get more sun. Mira's eyes lit up. That actually works. Thomas laughed. I didn't think of that, but it makes sense. Leo felt a small, warm pride. It wasn't the pride of victory over others, but the quiet satisfaction of collaboration. The garden thrived under their combined effort. The rows of vegetables growing strong and healthy, learning patience. Another day, Master Elian introduced a puzzle to the class. A wooden labyrinth through which a small marble had to be guided from one end to the other without dropping it. Leo's first instinct was to take control, to seize the marble and move it quickly. But Elian shook his head. This is not about speed, Leo. It is about observation and care. Leo tried to follow the instruction, but frustration gnawed at him. His friends suggested slow, careful movements, and he felt the urge to argue. He clenched his fists, remembering the broken oak and the bending bamboo. Finally,